Hello everyone. Today we are going to discuss hot wet equatorial climate. Now in this discussion we are going to take a look at the distribution of this type of climate. Apart from that, the patterns of temperature, pressure, wind as well as precipitation. In addition to that, we are also going to talk about the vegetation and the animal life in this particular type of climatic region. First, as far as this type of climate is concerned, Köppen has identified this type of climate as AF type of climate, whereas Trevartha has recognized this climate as a R type of climate. Now, in climatic classification scheme, both with respect to Köppen and Trevartha, A type of climate would be representing hot climate, high temperatures, whereas F or R used over here, this is with respect to rainfall or the precipitation, that is high amount of precipitation, as well as the distribution, monthly distribution of the rainfall. So first, about the distribution pattern of this type of climate. This climate, because this is equator and the sun remains nearby over here only, this type of climate would be found 5 to 10 degrees on the either side of the equator. Of course, on the eastern margin, this type of climate can extend up to 15 to 25 degrees latitude also. So global distribution, if we take a look over here, the global distribution would be in South America, first of all, this region, which is the Amazon basin. In addition to that, in Africa, we find the distribution to be over here, where this region represents our Congo basin, whereas this region is the Guinea region. So Congo basin and the Guinea region, and apart from that, in these regions of Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines is where this type of climate would be found. So this is the distribution of the hot wet equatorial climate. Now, taking a look at the temperature patterns over here, what we find is again the sun is pretty much nearby the equator only throughout the year, and hence here day of length roughly remains equal to the day length of night. So length of day is roughly equal to length of night. And due to this reason, the temperature in this particular climatic belt remains high throughout the year. Now overall, if we see, the average temperature in this region remains greater than 18 degrees Celsius. As far as the annual range of temperature is concerned, told you throughout the year the temperature remains high, and so the annual range of temperature, remains very low. In fact, the annual range of temperature is in the range of 2 degree to 3 degrees Celsius. But at the same time, when we talk about the diurnal range, so diurnal range of temperature over here is high. That is, the day times are very hot, whereas night would be very cold. In fact, here the diurnal range of temperature can reach as high as up to 15 degrees Celsius to 20 degrees Celsius also. And that's the reason why it is said that night is the winter of equatorial region. This is primarily because during the night time, the sky becomes cloudless, and so the loss of energy, loss of heat energy from the ground is extremely high. So low annual range of temperature, whereas high diurnal range of temperature. In addition to that, now talking about the pressure and the wind system over here, what can be seen primarily would be the region we are talking about, that is this region. So this region now is the belt of calm. Belt of calm, This region throughout remains very warm, and so the pressure gradient here is extremely less. Now, when the pressure gradient is less, which means pressure gradient force is less, and so winds are very feeble over here. In addition to that, this is a region where there is the convergence of the trade winds. So the convergence of the trade winds, now what we see is this becoming northeasterly trades. So these are northeasterly trades, whereas these are southeasterly trades. And so this zone becomes the convergence of these two trade winds. Now, due to the convergence as well as extreme heating of the ground, the air starts rising very fast. So this is how the pressure, of course, this becomes a low pressure region. So a low pressure region with very feeble winds, very less pressure gradient available over here due to uniformity of the temperature in the region. So this region also called as belt of doldrums. Pressure and wind system in this region. Apart from that, now talking about precipitation. So precipitation in this region is very high. In fact, the average annual rainfall we can take up to be somewhere around 250 centimeters. Although on the extreme side, this is the average annual rainfall. On the extreme side, if you see in Africa, at the foothills of Cameroon mountains, just for an example, the rainfall is as high as 1000 centimeters. So rainfall is very high over here. And why the rainfall is high? So high rainfall, and this is a probable question for the examination. High rainfall, what are the reasons for high rainfall in the equatorial region? Now, first reason definitely is high temperature. And because of high temperature, the air becomes very warm and rises fast. So the convection currents are very strong over here. So strong convection. That becomes first reason. Apart from that, second reason is convergence. So as I told you, this is a region where there is a convergence of northeasterly trades and southeasterly trades. Now these northeasterly and southeasterly trade winds, the trade winds are the tropical maritime tropical air masses. These maritime tropical air masses bring a lot of moisture with them, which results in very high relative humidity in this region. And so this becomes maritime tropical air mass, and the convergence of these maritime tropical air masses result in high rainfall. Apart from that, the weak atmospheric disturbances. Now these weak atmospheric disturbances, because this is a region which is impacted by the trade winds, weak atmospheric disturbances hit the continental part, more specifically the eastern and the middle parts or the central parts of the continents. One thing to note over here is that this region would be relatively free from very strong atmospheric disturbances, or let's say strong tropical cyclones. And why is it so? It is because of the weak Coriolis force over here. We all know that the tropical cyclones will need Coriolis force. And in the equatorial region, given the lower latitude, the Coriolis force is very weak. So this is a region which is not impacted by strong cyclones, but rather weak cyclones. But these weak cyclones or weak atmospheric disturbances themselves produce a lot of precipitation in this particular region. Plus, along with that, what can be seen is the cloudiness in this region. And the cloudiness of this region is high. Okay, at averaging the value, we get it to be around 60% of cloudiness. And this cloudiness reaches its maximum somewhere around 3 to 4 p.m. So from morning 10 to 11 a.m. or so, the clouds begin forming. when sufficient heating of the ground has taken place, and the cloud formation reaches its maximum by around 3 to 4 p.m. And at this time, around 4 p.m. or so, it starts raining heavily. In fact, that is the reason here cumulonimbus clouds are formed. And because in the equatorial region they start raining around 4 p.m. or so, the cumulonimbus clouds are also known as 4 p.m. cloud. Due to this cloudiness, what can be observed over here is, in terms of insolation or in terms of temperature, in both the cases, equatorial region does not have the highest values on the earth. Neither equatorial region receives the highest insolation on the earth, nor it has the highest temperatures. Rather, you will find that somewhere near subtropics 25 to 35, 40 degrees, this is where the cloudiness is also less. So insolation is very high as well as heating is very high. In terms of temperature, if you see, temperature does not reaches very high values, primarily because of clouds, cloud cover, as well as along with that, the precipitation. Precipitation here, when we see, okay, generally the type of climate that we are talking about in this case, there is no dry month essentially. Okay, every month it rains. So it is almost like throughout the year it rains, and because of everyday rainfall or very regular rainfall, the temperature does not rises too much. So this is about the precipitation part with respect to the climate, that is equatorial climate. In addition to that, the precipitation, although would be taking place throughout the year, every month it rains, but yet it has two maximas. These maximas, because this region receives majority of its rainfall through convectional rainfall, and convectional rainfall is properly dependent on the heating of the surface. And now, through the time of the year, what would be the times when there would be maximum heating of the equatorial zone? Very obviously, when sun would be right there in this zone. And when sun comes in the equatorial zone, these would be two equinoxes. So two equinoxes, that would be March and September. So just following this, March would be 21st March would be equinox. So the first week of April would have extremely high rainfall. Second, again, you will get another equinox on 23rd of September. So last week of September and first month of October, this is again when you will get very high rainfall. So here we are going to get two maximas of rainfall. This is the precipitation pattern in this particular climatic belt. Now, going beyond that, when we talk about the vegetation aspect of this climatic belt, the vegetation over here is definitely a manifestation of climate. Vegetation is manifestation of climate. Climate over here is a high temperature as well as high precipitation. So there is a very luxuriant growth of vegetation in this particular zone. About the vegetation, when we see what are the specific points, so because the rainfall is very high over here, so first what we find over here would be broad-leaved evergreen trees. Broad-leaved because the rainfall is very high. So to cope up with such a high availability of water, the leaf size becomes larger so as to allow more of evapotranspiration. And so broad-leaved evergreen forests or trees would be found over here. Now the diversity in these type of forest is extremely high. In fact, these are one of the most biodiverse region on the earth. So high diversity, let's say for example, if we take Amazon rainforest, in Amazon rainforest you would be able to find almost more than 300 species of trees over an area of only 2 square kilometers. Such a high biodiversity, specifically the diversity of plants, is found in this particular region. Now, what happens is because the forests are very dense, plus in addition to that, they have a very, very thick canopy cover. So due to this thick canopy, the first thing what happens is the sunlight is not able to reach the ground. So if we see over here, what I see is if the canopy cover is very thick over here, the sunlight would not be able to penetrate through it. And so these regions are dark. Because the sunlight is not reaching on the forest floor, you will find very less of the undergrowth over here. So undergrowth is very less. So first thing with respect to thick canopy is less undergrowth. In addition to that, there would be a lot of competition for sunlight. And because of these, the trees grow very, very tall. So tall trees are there. So trees reaching up to the height of 90 meters or 100 meters is not very uncommon in this type of forest region. So we have the tall trees over here. Plus, along with that, one characteristic feature of these type of forest is that these forests are highly stratified. Stratification is there. And stratification looks something like where you have one canopy level up here, another canopy level up here, and so on. So you have one level, two level, and so on. You will find different levels. And in these type of forests, what we see is we would be able to find one of the highest stratification of the forest anywhere on the earth. In fact, in these cases, you can find as much as 11 stratas. So these forests are highly stratified also. Along with that, what we find in these type of forests are vegetation. In terms of vegetation, you'll find lianas and epiphytes. Now, lianas and epiphytes, primarily, when you see the examples, the lianas and epiphytes both depend on other trees, but the basic difference being the lianas are rooted in the ground, whereas the epiphytes are rooted in the tree itself. So epiphytes may be rooted in the tree branch or tree bark, and so, but one thing that is, the epiphytes are not parasitic in nature. So they do not harm their host. They only use the trees for support and growth on it. So if you see some example, epiphytes over here, what I see in this case, either would be fern, or I can find mosses growing over here. These are the two examples of epiphytes. On the other hand, in this case, what you see, a climber, different types of climbers which are there. These are the climbers you can see. These are the climbers which fall under the category of lianas. So in this case, you can see this epiphyte, it is growing on a tree branch. So that's where we are saying they are rooted in the tree itself. Okay, on the other hand, these climbers, they are rooted in the ground. They only use the tree for their support. So these are epiphytes and lianas. In addition to that, now when we move on to the other characteristic feature of the vegetation, going on with the vegetation, what we see one more aspect, that is lalang. Now lalang are tall grasses. These grasses now grow in the region where the sunlight is able to penetrate the forest. So in certain cases, somewhere in some portions, the canopy cover may not be that thick due to any reason. And if the sunlight is able to reach the ground, because the conditions are so conducive, undergrowth is extremely high. But that is only in the region where sunlight is able to penetrate the canopy cover. And that's where these are the regions where we find the growth of tall grasses, which are called as lalangs. Overall, very popularly, the vegetation which we call as the equatorial rainforest. In specifically in the Amazon rainforest, okay, these type of forests, they are called as selvas. Although it can be it is a term which can be used in general for equatorial rainforest, but very specifically in Amazon rainforest, these forests are called as selvas. So this is about the vegetation of this region. And after that, now when we talk about the animal life of this region, the animal life of this region in this particular zone or in this particular region, now the animals that we find, again a lot of varieties found, although in terms of carnivores, jaguars are found over here. In addition to that, you will find arboreal animals, so living on the trees and all. So different kinds of monkeys would be found over here, apes would be found over here. Okay, this is where you can see a spider monkey found over here. In addition to that, a lot of reptiles are found. Here we can see anaconda. So a lot of reptiles are found over here. Numerous varieties of frogs are found over here. And in addition to that, very high diversity in terms of insect life is found in this particular climatic belt. But now, most importantly, the equatorial rainforests are extremely dense, thick, and very luxuriant. Okay, we have seen it has extremely high levels of diversity, let's say in terms of trees only. But yet, these have not been commercially exploited. Why they have not been commercially exploited? Primarily because of the fact that there is so much of a mix up of the varieties of the trees because of high diversity in one particular region. Like told you, in the regions of Amazon rainforest, you will find almost 300 species over 2 square kilometer area. So it's all so mixed up that you do not find pure stands of one particular quality of tree. And that's why commercial utilization has not been very much possible. Also, along with that, because the forests are so thick, so dense, okay, even if the commercial utilization is thought of, you cut a tree, okay, it is very difficult to take it out, transport it, again because of very thick and dense forests. So these forests have not been commercially exploited. But yet, Europeans have introduced plantation farming in this particular type of forest, clearing the native vegetation of the region and practicing plantation farming or plantation agriculture. And the most popular of the plantation farmings that we see would be, first, that would be rubber. And the rubber plantation we find majorly in the regions of Malaysia and Indonesia. These are the regions where we find rubber farming and the cocoa farming. The cocoa farming would be in the regions of Guinea. So Guinea region or Ghana or Nigeria, these are the regions where the commercial farming with respect to plantation farming were developed by the Britishers. So this is all about the first climatic region, that is the hot, wet equatorial climate. Thank you.